I wanted to talk a little bit more about patterns and numbers and sequences and how we write those equations with recursion, but also how we might write our patterns and sequences with a recursive equation given to us. So to begin with, you're going to see I have two patterns here, and they look really similar. They both start at 2. The next term is 3.5. And then they start kind of splitting off. The first thing I would always check is the pattern going up by a common addition or subtraction? And if you remember, that means it's an arithmetic sequence. You can watch an earlier video of mine to get into more of these definitions. So, for instance, here, we added 1.5. We also did that here. We just added 1.5. Well, then here, we added 1.5 again. Well, that is definitely not what happened there. Okay, so what we see is that we have this common addition up here that's applying of 1.5. So this is an arithmetic sequence. Again, arithmetic means add or subtract, and the other type, multiply or divide, is geometric. This is arithmetic, and it's starting at 2 and adding 1.5 every time. So we've now figured out the pattern. We have our sequence. So let's talk about recursion. How we write is we have 2 lines. We begin by saying, well, what was the first term? Now that is literally, because sometimes students get confused, that is literally the first term. Like, where did it start? It started at 2. That was our first term. Then we say, to get to a term, we have to use the 1 in front of it. And again, I just want to highlight, this means the nth term, and this is the 1 before it. So to get from one term to the next, we just have to say, well, what am I doing every time? I'm just adding 1.5. That was the pattern. Okay, that's all. So this right here is our recursive equation. Give a starting value and then give the pattern. And I know that this is always confusing at first, these subscripts. Just remember, it's saying, if you wanted to calculate what the 10th term was, you'd need the 9th term and then add 1.5 to it. Okay? Now, down in this second example, this didn't work, this addition of 1.5. So then what I would do is I'd say, well, let's see if I could divide and get a common ratio, a multiplier. Well, 3.5 divided by 2 is 1.75. Like, literally just take the second number and divide it by the first and say, well, what did I multiply by? And now we say, okay, we multiplied by 1.75. Is that consistent? And if you check with your calculator, it is. We just multiplied by 1.75 to get from one term to the next. That is our pattern. So this is what's called a geometric. Let me just make a note. Arithmetic is add or subtract. Geometric is multiply or divide. And now we're going to write our recursive equation. Again, we say, well, where did it start? This started at 2. Again, just come back over here and say, what was the first number? It was 2. Our second piece, we say, well, what was the pattern here? We're multiplying by 1.75. Sometimes you'll see these written, I'm just going to write below this, as the number out front, because we're kind of used to, putting our numeric coefficients out front when we do multiplication, but it doesn't matter. They're the same. So there is our way to kind of isolate our pattern and then write our equation. Let's do one other thing. Let's say instead of being given the pattern, we were given the equation, and we wanted to list some of the pattern or the sequence. So I'm saying we're going to list 5 terms. I've given 2 recursive equations here. Now, the first thing we should start with is just figure out, well, what was the first term? It was 5. So now, we already have 1. We know the first term was 5. And then we go to the pattern. We say, well, what did they tell us to do? You can see they said, well, to get a term, take the one right in front of it and multiply it by 2. So to get to this second term, I take the one in front of it and I multiply by 2. 5 times 2 is 10. And then we keep going with that pattern. So multiply by 2, multiply by 2, and multiply by 2. There's the first 5 terms. So again, a geometric, I'll just make a little note, geometric sequence. Next up, our first term is 6. So that's where we're going to start. So we'll just list that. And you'll see it tells us that to get it the next term, we just take the one in front of it, in this case 6, and subtract 2. So we're going to subtract 2 and then just keep going. And there we are. If this video helped you, please like and subscribe for more math help. I have videos about geometry, algebra, calculus, statistics.